Good morning or afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Biomed Digital Startup Stadium panel discussion, The Insider's Perspective, Getting a MedTech Investment. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This session is designed to be interactive. The dock of widgets at the bottom of your screen will allow you to learn about today's speakers, download resources, share this webinar via social media outlets, and participate in the Q&A session that takes place at the end of the panel discussion. Towards the end of our webinar, we will ask you to complete our survey found on the right-hand side of your screen. Please take a minute to fill this out before leaving us today, as your feedback will provide us with valuable information on how we can improve future events. If you're experiencing any technical problems, please click the help widget found at the bottom of your screen, or type your issue into the Q&A area, and we will be glad to offer one-on-one assistance. Before we begin, I would like to thank our sponsor, MedWorld Advisors. So now on to the panel discussion. Introducing our moderator for this panel, Dave Sheppard, Managing Director and Co-founder of MedWorld Advisors. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Informa. And thank you to the people at Mass Medic for how they've been so engaged this year in 2020 to keep us all educated, entertained, and connected. And hopefully we'll find in the next hour this will be more of the same. We have three distinguished panelists this afternoon, very successful entrepreneurs in their own right. Happy to introduce Mr. Rahul Dhanda, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sherlock Biosciences. Along with him will also be Andy Levine, who is the CEO of Conformal Medical, and then also Dr. Jon Bloom, who is the CEO of Podimetrics. I will begin by introducing myself. Again, this is Dave Sheppard, MedWorld Advisors. Happy to be here with everybody today and participate with this panel. I think they have some interesting things to say about how you can get a medtech investment, because they've done it the easy way, they've done it the hard way, and they've done it everything in between. And I think Dr. Jon Bloom might remember, I think I seated you with a cup of coffee at J.P. Morgan about 7 years ago, and I'm sure that was the secret to success. And we'll get more into that as we get going further. But let's start with introductions. Andy Levine, CEO of Conformal Medical, would you feel free to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, David. Nice to be here. So Andy Levine, I'm the CEO of Conformal Medical. Mechanical engineer by training, and I've been in the med device area, product development area for 35 plus years here in the Boston area. Started a few companies, worked for some of the big companies, and currently Conformal started a few years ago to develop left atrial appendage closure technology, which I'll talk about in a little bit.
We look forward to hearing a lot more about that. Mr. Rahul Dhanda, I'll go to you next.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thanks for Mass Medic for having us. I'm excited to be here. So my name is Rahul Dhanda. I'm the co-founder, CEO, and president of Sherlock Biosciences. I've been in molecular diagnostics for over 20 years, from bench to business. And Sherlock, as a company, is a molecular diagnostics company building two different platforms, one that is CRISPR-based, one that is synthetic biology-based. The goal of the company is to develop tools that can be used anywhere and everywhere. So, we are moving from what have been developed tests for the lab all the way through to point of care, and then into at-home self-administered molecular testing, which would be the first of its kind. So excited to discuss all of that. Thank you.
Definitely looking forward to more of that. And last but not least, Dr. Jon Bloom.
So thrilled to be here. I'm CEO of Podimetrics. We're a virtual care management company to prevent diabetic amputations. And before all this, I was an anesthesiologist. I got my first toe into industry working in medical affairs at Covidian, which, no longer exists now. And fun fact, the first person to pull me out of just medical affairs and really think about how do you drive the business forward, what is it like to be in the field, was Mr. Dave Sheppard over a decade ago. And just appreciate all the wisdom you give me over the years now, and just delighted to be here, tell you more about what we're doing.
Yeah, it's been great to connect with you over the years and learn from each other as we go forward. So let's go into the brief overview of each company and the mission that you have. One of the reasons why I left the Fortune 500 company, that world, which I had a good time in when I was there, was that I really enjoyed meeting with entrepreneurs and have a passion for innovation. And so it's great to spend time with each of the three of you, because I'm confident you share in that, because you can't be successful without having that passion. So let's come back to you, Andy. I was always interested in, what got you started? Why did you pick this mission? What got you started with the technology? What started the company? How did you get that going?
Yeah, thanks. So Conformal Medical, actually, the concept was initiated by a friend of mine, Dr. Aaron Kaplan, who's a cardiologist up at Dartmouth. Aaron and I have known each other a long time. He was starting to use a device called the Watchman, which is a device from Boston Scientific that is used to plug the left atrial appendage. So if you have AFib, atrial fibrillation, there's a small part of the heart called the left atrial appendage that blood can stagnate within, clots form, and then if the clot comes out, you can have a stroke. 5 to 7 million people have AFib. It's a huge problem in America and the world. So he actually came to me years ago and said, this first generation technology is really kludgy. It's difficult to use, but it works. So what can we do? And the funny part was, he said, he brought in, I actually have these things, those little animals that you would give your kids, and it was a capsule that you would put into warm water, and then it would blow up into a foam, a full animal. He said, I want to put this in the heart. And I said, okay, well, interesting start. So it was a great concept. It obviously evolved from there. And he and I started the company, put the first money in and got it going. And now we're moving along in clinical trials. So that was the origin of the company.
Well, Andy, thanks for that explanation, because even a sales and marketing guy like me can understand it. So I had those things with my kids.
Simple.
Rahul, same question for you. What got you started on the current mission that you have? What was the creation of the genesis of this?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to apologize to everybody. Because we're in Cambridge, they're literally tearing a building down behind me, so hopefully you can hear me. And the bulldozer is right outside my window. So Sherlock actually came together when a series of really remarkable individuals, including David Walt and Jim Collins and Feng Zhang, thought about different ways to close the gap between available testing today and those who really need it. And so when the company came together, there was a series of advances being made in CRISPR and synthetic biology. And personally, I was at a public diagnostics company that had launched product, was launching more product, and I kept getting these papers sent to me by these people who had invented these amazing things. And I thought, someday, some really lucky person is going to run the company that has these technologies. Now, 2 months later, David Walt called me and said, we have this vision of taking diagnostics everywhere from, the living room and family room to sub-Saharan Africa. And we think we have the technologies to do that. And so what happened was 9 of us actually as founders got together, worked out a vision which was incredibly well aligned. And it was really Jim Collins who's a professor at MIT and the Beast Institute, who had taken, and the Broad Institute, and taken both of these technologies, CRISPR and synthetic biology, and put them in this context of being able to do something that hadn't been done before. And that is put in the palm of your hand the lab accuracy of a molecular diagnostic. And that was the potential. Now, the vision that was built around it was really less to do with technology and more to do with about access to healthcare. And so this was a group that had succeeded in so many ways and had a passion for ensuring that anyone who could get a test and wanted a test, anybody who wanted to get a test would get a test. And so the company was launched with that vision in mind, that there would be affordable, rapid, simple, but unprecedented accuracy off the shelf. And we've been building towards that and are in sight of it now.
I would applaud your mission, and I would agree with you. I've thought for a long time. I've been in this industry for 30 years, and access to care has been one of the most critical things that we have to try to achieve together. So I applaud the mission, and look forward to continue to watch the success evolve and hear more about it as we talk today.
Thank you.
John, same question to you at Podimetrics. How did you go from being an anesthesiologist at Levine to all of a sudden you're saving limbs and lives over there at Podimetrics?
Well, it's certainly, it's probably its own maybe 7-hour talk to talk about how I went from being in anesthesia to now on to running a company. But I just, you bring a different toolkit to the world of industry. You're trying to, you have a good sense of problems. I actually think, though, a lot of training for physicians can be counterproductive in industry, right? Its own topic. But got to work a little bit at Covidien out of residency, where I got to meet Dave, and just got a sense that I thought innovation in generally that they'd come up with a new cool laser or a new thing, and they're like, okay, what can we do with that? As opposed to thinking about what are big problems, and then what can we put together to solve those problems. Eventually came to out here in Cambridge to get an MBA to try to learn this language of what was come up with. And in the second month of school, there was a hackathon event this weekend where you can come up with any company you want, let's get it up and running. And it was just this sort of silly, competition. I had no idea that me attending it was going to completely take over my life. And the problem that we're going after is diabetic amputations or diabetic foot complications. And it wasn't until recently that it was recognized a third of the cost of diabetes is linked to complications of the leg, of the foot. It's like $70 billion we spend each year in just direct payments. And it turns out most of it's avoidable. It's I just remember in the operating room, I'd spend whole days doing nothing but amputations, that we would lose a limb, completely rob this patient of their independence. And unfortunately, their fiber mortality is as high as 70%. That's worse than most cancers. For something that shouldn't happen, that we're still doing Civil War medicine, is disease cut it off for someone we can detect weeks before it ever happens. So, that was the problem we wanted to attack. Our original ideas were terrible, its own thing, and we really had to figure it out. But what we really realized is that the real problem wasn't detection of these wounds. It was one of adherence and engagement. This is a patient who's very complex. How can we get this patient to interact and use the system for very long periods of time so that we could do the virtual care we wanted to do? And then just the anonymized part. But what we ended up figuring out is if you can build, you bring together hardware, data science, and people. We build this, you might hear, by the way, my son in the background, as he's really having a good time, I can hear. We build a mat, goes into a patient's home. We just have them step on it for 20 seconds a day, and then they go on with the rest of their life. We then get a lot of data on this patient, this foot. We can detect these wounds over 5 weeks before they happen. And then we have a nursing team that can then take these data and actually coach these patients to prevent the complications from occurring. So it was a hard space to get into, because back then, virtual care and remote monitoring, the idea you'd have prevention doesn't pay. There were a lot of real barriers for us, but it just was a problem we got sucked into, and we thought we had to try to solve it.
As somebody who just turned 60 and maybe pre-diabetic as I go into my senior years, I'm glad to know I can still put sugar in my coffee, because you'll be around to save my feet. So
you should not be putting sugar. That's right. No.
Okay, I'll go to stevia. So Andy, question for you. So you can start your company as you described. How did you get it funded to get started? Maybe an overview of your funding history from your start to this point.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, Dr. Kaplan and I actually initiated the product development work. We funded it initially, brought on a couple of engineers that I've worked with in the past who were, had some spare time to look at doing some development work. And so we worked in one of their basements for a good year and a half or so, developing prototypes, testing some things. We would get, pig hearts from the slaughterhouse and bring them into the basement, and which his wife didn't appreciate, but it worked out okay. And so we did that for a while until we got something that we thought was workable, and then hit the road, started, asking for money. And we actually ended up putting a syndicate of angels, people we knew, venture people who were not interested in it from a venture point of view because it was really too early for them, but personally were interested. And then, fortunately, we ended up with a couple of corporates. One ended up leading our first Series A. So a corporate and a bunch of individuals that we've known. So that was our Series A. Our timing was good. The corporates were getting really interested in this market. The market was just beginning to really start to take off. So that took us through then our prototypes and our animal testing and development work. We then raised, and actually I think we started our first human trials with that money as well. We then raised a Series B, Catalyst Health Ventures, which is a venture group in Braintree I've known for years, and they led that round. All my Series A people came in, and we brought in another family fund. So it was interesting because the traditional venture groups, either it was too early or it wasn't enough money that we were looking for, so the ventures groups have gotten so big, they want to put, 10, 20, 30 million in, and we just wanted to raise 8, and so, right. So it really didn't fit their, their goals. So that took us then through our first human trials. And then just this summer, we raised a Series C, 85 million to take us through our pivotal trial. And we have a corporate and we have a Fidelity. So the type of investor we were going to now totally changed. So now the venture guys were, well, you're too late. And whereas before we were too early, now we're too late. And it was a lot of money. So some of the bigger investment groups were more interested in the banks and things like that. So it really, kind of gone through the whole thing from friends and family to big Fidelity.
Yeah, you really run the whole gamut. And one of the things I've heard from other CEOs is the first thing you think about when you get started is in the morning is fundraising. When you go to bed, you think about fundraising to keep the company going. Well,
we get a month or two off now because we've got a few years. But yes, we continually will be thinking about that.
Getting the big round can be helpful. Rahul, how about your fundraising story?
Yeah, so I have what's probably a very atypical diagnostic fundraising story, which makes it pretty typical because they tend to run the gamut. So we actually, began forming the company, in early 2018, but there were a lot of logistics, licenses to work out, 2 different institutions. And so we thought about it a couple of ways. We started to drive in parallel a fundraising process that would be contingent on securing the licenses that we required for the company. What we found was, the venture groups that we were discussing our vision with and funding the company were more interested in sort of control of the assets and the vision and mission that we were really focused on. And so we had a span of months where, it was a back and forth as to whether or not we were going to find the right fit, because this was a very, very specific mission that these founders and myself, as a founder, wanted to pursue. And simultaneously, we began engaging philanthropic groups because much of what we wanted to accomplish was in line with what a lot of philanthropy wants to pursue, particularly when it comes to access to healthcare. But the experience that I'd had is you need, obviously, to develop products for markets that will sustain your business. And even though your target may be those markets that don't currently have infrastructure to support that. So a universal offering that we could sell in, some low resource setting and major markets was a difficult balance to find. Luckily, what we did do is find a philanthropic group, Open Philanthropy, who was really bought into Sherlock's vision and really wanted to push the technologies that we had and our development into realms that we wouldn't normally go into, but bring along the platforms as opposed to applications. And so they were perfectly aligned in that they wanted to mature our technology with the belief that if we succeeded at that, we would, in fact, satisfy their goals and ours. And in my career, it's rare to find that kind of alignment. And we got very lucky because what they did is they essentially put in a note for $12.5 million and a grant for $17.5 million. And that became the foundation of our fundraising before we ran for the equity. And so when we went, and that was basically beginning of 2019. And then we went into 2019 looking to raise capital, and we're very fortunate because at that point we were getting to be well known. We launched the company actually before raising the capital. So we had the grant and the non-dilutive capital in place, which gave us the opportunity to make ourselves known and our mission known. And it became a different process where those who were aligned with the mission came to Sherlock instead of Sherlock trying to sell the vision and the mission to those who had other ideas around it. And we're very fortunate because we had two come simultaneously, Baidu Ventures and North Pond Ventures, to want to lead, both of whom agreed with the caveats around building the kind of company we wanted, and ended up raising an equity round of $30 million, and then building on it was actually $32 million, and then about another $20 million in total that was non-dilutive, and that became essentially our Series A, $50 million plus. That was atypical because of obviously the structure, but also atypical because it was a pre-COVID raise where diagnostics was always a challenge to raise capital for. And we're very fortunate to find the kinds of investors who actually aligned around the vision. And now I think we're seeing the value just because diagnostics has moved out of its shadow in healthcare to the forefront.
Congratulations on the success with that round. And you mentioned three of my favorite words, or anybody who's run a cap table, and that's a non-dilutive funding. That's always nice to be able to achieve. And the other thing you mentioned there, that my experience now, and I'm being on both sides, on the Fortune 500 side, and then here at MedWorld, we get new clients that we help companies to sell their business or to sell their emerging technology to strategics. And people ask me, what's the typical deal? And the first thing I'll tell them, Rahul, is there is no typical deal. Every deal is unique, and it has its own flavor and its own pathway. So great, that's a great story. Jon, your fundraising history?
Yeah, so for the first year, we were just running off of the only non-dilutive capital we'd get for the company were like competition winnings. The grad school I went to has this year-long competition called the 100K, and if you do well, they give you some early cash and you get some good mentorship. But it was tough because 9 years ago, the idea of virtual care or even a lot of data, that wasn't considered a thing, and we just kept hearing prevention doesn't pay. Prevention doesn't pay, guys. It was a struggle. Now we were fortunate. It really was two angels and a venture firm that came together to get our first round up, and that was October of 2012. I think you guys, a lot of who may be on this, watching this, got to see Aaron Sandusky at an earlier one. He was with he's with Norwich Ventures, so he was the first venture firm we got to work with. And then Andy Palmer was one of the judges at the 100K, so he got to see us, and he was crazy enough to put money in. And I got him Ephraim Heller, who had founded TheraSense. It was really those three people that were willing to kind of ideas maybe skate to where the puck is going, as opposed to what seemed like it would fit today. And we could talk about, other questions, like the challenges of what it's like to have something that doesn't fit, like what we had to do to get something that kind of doesn't make sense to get it. Maybe in total, we've raised about $25 million to last us about 9 years, we've been, to do a device company with data science and, people operations. It was a tough time for a lot of those years, but we kept at it and we're able to get to today. And I'll probably talk more about the things we've been doing ever since.
Yeah, I understand the environment you're in, because everybody has loved the thought about prevention since the day, my first day before I even had gray hair in this industry. However, if it wasn't going to be reimbursed, then nobody wanted to pay for it or invest in it. So I can see those challenges. So now here, 10 years later, all of a sudden you're an overnight success with all the tailwinds with you, but you had to go through a lot of headwinds to get there. So
my goodness,
congratulations on that. And all three of you kind of touched upon something that we've kind of find here at MedWorld as far as working with our clients and deals, is that kind of value, it turns out to be strategic fit. You've got to have the right fit with the right investor or buyer, and then you need to have the right timing, because it can be the right fit, but if it's just not the right timing for them, it's not going to make sense. Or if it is the right timing, then that's the time you can really jump and run. So I was just kind of thinking about it. You guys have all have great stories. I'm sure there's been some lessons you've learned along the way that could be very interesting for people that are watching to be able to learn from each of you. So maybe Andy, any thoughts about some of the lessons that you've learned that could be helpful to people that are watching that would want to go down your path?
Yeah, so actually it's interesting you mentioned the timing. I'm a big believer that you really have to be watching the market, and you can have the best invention ever and everyone agrees, but if your timing is wrong, it's just not going to happen. And, so what do you do? I mean, when we started Conformal, the whole idea of left atrial appendage closure was a brand new thing. And in fact, as we were fundraising, so there was nothing approved. There was this company, Atratech, became Boston Scientific, had been through the FDA twice. They were, multiple clinical trials. And, oh, by the way, even if it was approved, CMS wasn't going to pay for it. And so, you're sitting there going, so we had a great idea and nobody wanted to get involved. Everyone said, yeah, we love it, but we'll wait. And so, honestly, for the first couple of years, we kind of danced around. We put some money in, we did some things, but we couldn't raise that first round. And then Boston got approval, FDA approval. They got a really nice CMS reimbursement path. And I think within weeks, we were starting to get term sheets. And so, and I was fortunate enough, and Aaron was too, we all had other jobs to do. So we didn't have to have this. And so we knew that no matter how hard we push, it's just not going to happen. And so we kind of vamped until ready. And then when the market turned, we had already talked with a bunch of the venture people, a bunch of the corporates, and we had a kind of a whole corral of people that then we could call on quickly. And it came together pretty quickly, actually, but pretty quickly after 2 years. So the timing is everything. We started this last fundraising in January, and then COVID hit. And, I could scream as much as I want, but nobody was picking up the phone at that point. Everybody was scared. But that didn't last very long. And then, everybody realized, well, life goes on and we got to continue to fund things. And so off we went. So again, I just think you have to be thinking about your timing, and sometimes there's nothing you can do. Sometimes you can go talk to other people that, but you got to recognize who you're talking to glazes over and they're like, well, yeah, that's cool, but not going to fit our market or our timing.
So it sounds like,
Andy,
so it sounds like, Andy, while you were waiting for the timing to come around, you still were doing a lot of footwork and groundwork so that when the timing hit, you could cash in, so to speak, on the timing when it did come. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky enough to be able to support ourselves and, keep the engineers kind of going. And we filed patents, we filed we were making prototypes and all that. But we also kind of knew that, we weren't going to get too far. So, yeah, we got all the groundwork laid. And then when the timing was right, it all came together.
So it sounds like maybe another lesson from what you went through, Andy, was try not to get too ahead of yourself, even though you might think it's the greatest invention. If the funding's not going to be there, find a way to survive until that timing hits, and then you can take off from there.
Yeah, you got to wear a lot of hats. You got, look, multiple times I've had multiple jobs, kind of juggling. I mean, we need income, right? So, do some consulting, do some other stuff, write some grants, whatever. But, you got to keep juggling until the timing is right.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. Rahul, same question for you. You've done an amazing job with fundraising. I bet you there's been some lessons learned along the way that could be interesting to some people watching.
Yeah, I think there's a couple. No offense to the investment community out there, but probably my first one is don't trust any investor until they're your investor. There's a lot of information and expertise and knowledge that you bring to the table. And there's a long process to get money. You're talking about millions of dollars, whether it's 1 or 20. It's a lot of money. And so there's a lot of diligence. And so there's a story and a narrative that you want to control, because you want all of that aligned with the company you're building. And until you're sure that's aligned, you're not sure you're building your company. And so whatever it is you have to do, make sure you can do that. So at Sherlock, what we did is we announced the company. And that achieved this goal and the second goal. By announcing the company before raising the capital, the company was known for what it would be. Not everybody can do that. We're fortunate that way, which is going to be my third lesson. So on the second, by announcing the company, we were able to do two things. One is control the narrative and make sure that's aligned. But number two, also create a very limited number of conversations that we had, because you can't run and build a company. Dave, as you said, you wake up thinking about fundraising, you go to sleep thinking about fundraising. And what you need to also wake up and go to sleep doing is thinking about building a company. And if you're talking to every potential investor versus the ones who can make your company more valuable and align with what you're going to do, you're not spending the time efficiently. There's too much that you have to do as an entrepreneur and as a leader that allows you to take on, untargeted conversations, especially around how you're going to form your board and the objectives and plan for your company. I think the third thing I'd say is you cannot depend on luck, but you've got to be ready for it. And so you've got to be building value, keeping your eyes open, being incredibly decisive when the moment comes for you to make a decision that may not have been something you were considering, but that is critical to the kind of value creation that you're searching for. And so that aspect of luck, none of us are here without luck. There's just no way to avoid it. We're all, I'm sure Andy and John are very good, but I am very fortunate for the luck that has come my way that we can be prepared for. And I think if you're not decisive and you're not looking around to make sure that you're taking advantage of opportunities that align with your business, then you're not doing the job you need to really raise the value of your company. Because at the end of the day, what you want is to project and support the confidence in value. Because not anybody, but it's not hard to go raise a company, raise capital around a company valued at $1 million. But none of us want to do that. We want a pre-money valuation that's high enough to approximate what we see the future value of this company to achieve in some proportion. So making sure you're focused on value creation and being prepared for the opportunities to seize on that, I think is probably the third thing that I would say falls in that category.
Rahul, that's excellent advice. Your first point about not trusting the investor who's not your investor, reminds me a lot of, I watch Shark Tank a lot. I don't know if anybody else watches that, but I always hear Kevin O'Leary, he'll make some kind of, quote, sharky offer to the entrepreneur, and then somebody else will say, don't take that. But then he's saying, don't listen to that guy because he's not making you an offer. Say, you really should only be talking to the people that actually are trying to make you an offer and to lean in with you to where you're going. So it's a good point. And I think your point about being prepared also is, and it goes back to luck and timing, right? So sounds like a great story. And we'll come back to a couple of the luck things in a few minutes when we talk about diagnostics and COVID. Jon, I know you've got some great lessons learned in a few years of climbing up the ladder to be where you are today.
Well, I can say first bit of wisdom is don't go on Shark Tank. Oh my gosh, and watch them, the bad behavior that they have, exploiting term sheets. Like, they're bringing in all these signs that they're bad partners for you. They're signaling it like crazy. You're going to be with this person for a very long time, and listen to those signals. That shows all sorts of bad news. It's a great boot camp to just watch who not to go with. I often really just makes me uncomfortable when I watch these entrepreneurs pitching for their life there. It was interesting for us. We came out at a time where no one had really ever sold value savings to a health plan like ours before. You'd have to get a code and have to get reimbursed. And here we have hardware, but then we have all this machine learning and data science, and then we have services. We're actually a services company, a tech-enabled services company. That's how we operate. We're not a device company. And that was a lot for people to really wrap their heads around. So, a couple of thoughts were, Bill at MIT, he'll always teach, and his first thing he teaches in the class is the single necessary and sufficient condition of a successful company is a paying customer. And that's a powerful statement. People say, oh, it's cool tech, and I have all these different answers. No, it's a paying customer. So for us, really, if we think about how we needed to spend our time, it was validating that we think we could do what we said we could do, but it was getting payers to talk to Aaron, our first VC, and as part of diligence, get them to the spot where they told them, yeah, if they build it, we would buy it. We would buy it. And them verifying that there was a transaction, man, that was the time probably best spent, because if there's no transaction, it really could be the best idea in the world, but it has to have a business model that can get it out. And that was a big spot. We knew the science, it was all coming together, but we had to get that piece that was there. Another bit of wisdom, because you already heard a bunch of great ideas, is I think go to them early is another way to think about it. Get to know them. They're keeping an eye on you. They're trying to see, is this a team that can take coaching? Is this a team that's going to keep solving problems? And ideally, come with them when you have real problems. Get thought partnership. Let's think about, here's what I'm dealing with right now. And then and don't come to them when you need the money, right? You're just learning, kind of figure out who you like. And then maybe when you're ready, you come back and you're actually raising, they've actually now seen you attack a pretty meaty problem. They know that you can, here's how you went about and fixed it. And that's showing them momentum. That's showing them team. That's showing them a lot of stuff. So I really, they're great for wisdom. They're great for eventual advisors, and they're also great because they get your company up and running and fun. And then today it's just a weird environment. I guess we'll talk more about it. Suddenly, the whole world is going virtual, and virtual care it was kind of a crazy thing. Andy made a comment before earlier that you might get into a spot where now people are trying to push money into your company, and you have to be so thoughtful about do you actually? It's a crazy thing. Do you need a $20 million check? Do you need a $40 million check? And so we just needed 8, and we were like, well, you take 20, and it wasn't. It didn't. It's making sure that you're being responsible. Granted, you take money when you get it. You don't want to be because that window might close at some point. But I think people can overcapitalize their company pretty quickly, and you should be very deliberate about the right time. You also want it for all shareholders to maximize the value when that money comes in, right? So you do it too early, you dump in all this cash, and you haven't really built up the value. You're potentially hurting the other investors that are already in the company, or the rest of all your employees. So that's probably what I would add is that part. But to me, probably the biggest one is get to know them early, and then really, you're going to be married. Like, I've now known Aaron for almost a decade. Love the guy, but it was because we spent so much time and he probably had it, he probably heard it earlier. He was looking at me. Can I work with this guy? I'm going to be with this guy a long time. Will I enjoy it? And it was just like this relationship. You have to, hopefully you're going to enjoy every time. Like, if you don't want to talk to them, that's a problem in the company. You got to enjoy talking.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of common theme there between all three of you as far as don't wait till you need the money to start talking to them. Like in Andy's story, it took 2 years for the timing to be right, but he had already talked to a bunch of people and lined them up. So same same thing for you. You're building the relationships so you could be ready at the right time. And then, John, you bring up an excellent point that I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is like, how much do I need, right? Because you don't want to dilute too much too early, but you want to make sure you have enough for the runway for the next milestone. So, any additional thoughts on that? On raising the right amount?
I know one of the mistakes I think I see a lot of early entrepreneurs make is they don't assume that it's going to take them another 6 months to raise their next round. So often they'll model out, okay, here's how much I need to get through my clinical trial, whatever that milestone is. And great, that's my number. And they often forget that you need 6 more months of burn on top of it, maybe longer, to make sure that once you have your milestone, then you hit the pavement, you still got to close this thing. So I think you want to take more than you probably need. You know you're probably going to mess up. You should be transparent with your investors. Like, look, here's some areas we're gonna pad a little bit for risk. But you don't want to overcapitalize. It's better for you as a founders. It's to overdump in money. Now even like expectations on if investors, if they're really exit focused and suddenly it changes the math if they dump in 100 million. To be respectful of, make sure you're all aligned on the same why you're building this company, and often just you don't need as much money as people throw you.
Right. Okay. Well, our next topic is go ahead.
I was just gonna say, every time I've been raising money, I have 3 business plans, and it kind of depends on who you're talking to. You want to know where your milestones are, so you don't want to take so much money, as you said, that you're diluting everybody. But there's no right answer here. I mean, if somebody wants to give you a couple million and there's a milestone that makes sense, then you can take it. If somebody wants to give you 10 million and there's a milestone and you can get the valuation, then you take it. So I think, from my point of view, I'm always, whenever I go into someone, they either say you're taking too little, you're taking too much, and the answer is sure. What do how do we do this? So I guess that would be my only caveat there.
Yeah, that's very.
There was an amazing scene in Silicon Valley, which is such a great mirror on our world in a humorous way. And they're looking at this CEO, and he's decimated. He just destroyed his company, and he's sitting. He's like, I could have taken less. I could have taken less. That was a singular lesson at the bar, and he's depressed. And that's like, there is a right amount, and you overcapitalize. It is a big problem. I like that. I like what Eddie said. Like, does that milestone? True. Is it rational? Does it make sense?
Right. Yeah. Very, very, very practical. So my last question before I turn over to audience questions. You can't have a conversation in 2020 without talking about COVID, obviously. So there's been huge impacts on anybody in this industry, one way or another, and especially for people trying to raise money in this environment. And there could be some opportunistic help there. There could be some headwinds or tailwinds. So Andy, I'll start with you and just hear your COVID experience of trying to raise funds at the moment.
Yeah, so since I'm not raising money now, but as I said, we started in January. We were going full bore, and then February, March, kind of everything shut down. People were like, what are you, crazy? We can't raise money. But we just kept going, and the company had plenty of runway, fortunately, and we had lots to do. The challenge was a lot of our vendors got shut down. We had a clinical trial that got shut. Yeah, we shut it down, but it was kind of in the same time period. The timing was okay, but we had to kind of stop. And so over the summer, as I said, the investors kind of woke back up and said, well, the world's not ending. We got to keep moving. So that started up again. And then the company, we never shut down. We were careful. We've been careful. We continue to be careful. And so far, knock on wood, we've been able to keep the company going. The big problem for us we have to run a clinical trial next year. And, anyone who tells you they know what the clinical environment's going to be like a year from now isn't telling you the truth. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the elections because it has nothing to do with it. But, we just don't know what's going to happen. So there are clinical trials ongoing now, and we think we'll be able to, get them up and going. But we're going to have to see. And if they get closed for a bit, we're going to have to save cash. And if, we're just going to have to see. So that's, to me, the biggest unknown at this point.
Yeah, one of the interesting things for us working with clients in this investment environment was back in March and April. Financial investors don't like to invest in this world of uncertainties. So all of a sudden, March and April, everybody disappeared. But then all of a sudden, about May and June, all of a sudden they started to realize we still have all this money sitting here. And all of a sudden, the stock market rebound. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID, but heck, we need to start putting this money back to work. And the other thing that I found is that a lot of people that were harder to get a hold of before, all of a sudden nobody's traveling, so you can find them. You can actually get some things done a little bit faster. But, Rahul,
although
go ahead, Andy.
Not good for weight gain and sitting in your office all day. But yeah,
that's why I got to take the sugar out of my coffee. Rahul, same question for you about COVID and impacts.
Yeah, so COVID's it's an interesting impact, particularly in a company that's developing diagnostic tests. So, so I've observed a couple things. One thing is that the capital markets have never been more. I mean, they've been more active in the last few months than they were all of last year. So there are things going on in our sector that are pumping capital into it, that are creating opportunities, whether or not you're a COVID company, which makes it somewhat interesting. We're not raising equity capital right now, but what we have seen, because Sherlock's pivot in late March was to become a COVID developer as a way to advance our platforms. And so what we've been weighing is the non-dilutive capital that's made available to companies working on those kinds of projects. The tension, as I mentioned a little earlier in this webinar, is whether or not those activities align with advancing the business broadly. And so the things that I look at and I think about when it comes to the capital raise is that we will be raising capital. We are in a different position than we were before, simply because we have accelerated all those milestones that Andy and John were just talking about, is what that capital is there for, because we've been given the opportunity to develop products in a very unique historical moment for healthcare. Doing that has helped us, maintain and raise that value of the organization, but more precisely, target the milestones that we are going to achieve towards those that are most valuable to the company in the most rapid pace we can have. And that puts us in a position to treat fundraising a little bit differently than we would have if we had not developed products under the COVID banner. I think the other aspect is that my industry and my sector in particular of diagnostics has seen somewhat of a renaissance of interest. And so we have firms coming to us interested in our next round who have helped my selection process because we know they're aligned with what it is that we're trying to achieve. So what we are spending our times on is, shortlisting inbound interest, identifying the milestones that prepare us best for when we do that capital raise, and in assessing the COVID investment market, which has very interestingly broadened the number of thoughtful investors interested in diagnostics. So while we search for non-dilutive capital that accelerates our pace, it's helping us assess the opportunity around the dilutive capital. That really sets us up for the next massive milestone after that which we can achieve with our current capital.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot to balance and to juggle there. And just a quick question for you, Rahul, in the midst of all this, with what you're doing with diagnostics, did you have an opportunity to get involved with an EUA through this process? Was that helpful to you, or was not relevant?
Yeah, actually, that for Sherlock. So when we were less than 1 year old, we began an EUA process that led to launching a lab-based product that was the first ever CRISPR product to go through the FDA. So everyone's been watching for therapeutics and other diagnostics that might come from CRISPR. We actually used the EUA process to launch the first ever CRISPR product of any sort to pass through an FDA authorization. we've also then struck a deal with a point of care company, Binks Health, who is in the process of preparing their EUA for a point of care COVID test. And we've launched another program mid-year this year to have an EUA with our synthetic biology platform for an at-home COVID test that's a molecular diagnostic that should be at the same price point and simplicity and ease of use and form factor as your current over-the-counter pharmacy off-the-shelf dipstick tests like pregnancy tests. So really, we've launched one and are driving towards two more.
Excellent. Excellent. That could probably be a whole other panel, so I won't follow on that right at the moment. But it's very interesting to know that you did that, and congratulations on working that through.
Thank you.
Jon, COVID, obviously you had some momentum going with your company when we went into 2020. As I like to say, I've been watching you, and you're saving limbs and lives over there, literally, at Podimetrics. And so I had to be feeling good coming into this year, and then all of a sudden COVID hits, and then what happened with you? What's going on?
Well, first of all, the problem amplified, right? Our patients are very medically complex: COPD, CAD, bad diabetes. Usually, 6% have chronic renal failure. When preventative clinics all started to drop, our patients were reliant on preventative care. Otherwise, even with preventative care, they were already bouncing in and out of ERs and hospitals. It's one of the most expensive patients we have to take care for as a healthcare system. They cost as much as $60K per patient per year to manage. And we found there was a study came on diabetes care that amputation rates were up threefold during COVID than before because of this issue. Like, they just weren't getting good care. And plus, diabetic amputations affects these patient populations that are of various minority groups. Like, for example, Black Americans are almost 4 times more likely to have an amputation than white Americans pre-COVID. So this is now hammering these patients that don't have great access to care to begin with. And that was a big part. It was just an explosion of the problem. 2 is we had data come out of we talk about luck. We had our data come out at just the right time. We had a big, even with pre-COVID preventative care, we had shown this patient population, we had dropped hospitalization by 52%, ER visits by 40%, amputations by 70%, outpatient visits by 27%. It basically resulted in $12,000 net savings to this patient per year. What an amazing time to have that data come out when everyone suddenly needs to have this solution. And even the market changed. Suddenly everyone needed to be virtual. This patient needed to stay in the home. And here we had the system. We had luckily gone completely virtual about 6 months before it hit, making sure we knew how to do it, not knowing that COVID was going to hit. And so the drop of the hat, we were able to deliver systems into their home to do this monitoring to keep them out of the system. It's funny, when March hit, suddenly 3 things were hot immediately out of the gate. Amazon, because everyone was buying stuff suddenly. Zoom, because suddenly all meetings went there. And virtual care. It had to immediately switch to it. Yet virtual care in the very patient population who needs it most, this Medicare patient, there was a study in JAMA that came out. 41% of these patients didn't have access to internet-connected phone or computer. The very patient who needed this virtual care, it was completely unscalable. And so, again, to have a system that was just passive, running in the background, we were just really well timed to suddenly be in big need for it. And it shot us forward. It's exciting to be able to help at a time like this. And, we'd been working so hard years to build up the tech, the data, the manufacturing. And then we were just fortunate when it was there, we were ready to roll immediately. The day that clinics went down, we started flying out mats to help these patients. It was really crazy.
Yeah, so Rahul called it luck. Andy called it timing. I think we're all talking at the same time thing. And it's really, you were prepared for the moment, right? And the moment was there, and you could help capitalize on that, and really not just capitalize in the way of benefit your company, but for the benefit of the patients and for the system that you're working with. Yeah, so that's excellent. In terms of with us, we had an early stage experience with COVID. We took on a very small company in terms of a company that we would typically, kind of borderline being able to sell. To happen to be a small little ventilation company, and we just signed the deal in the first week of March, And second week of March, the whole country shut down. And all of a sudden, we would usually put together, a teaser and a sim and all that sort of things. I just called the people over at GE Healthcare and I said, I think you guys might need some events right now. What do you think? And had a conversation. And 2 days later, they had Ford Motor Company on the line with our client. And 12 days later, President Trump was announcing the deal between Ford Motor Company to make 50,000 events licensed by GE Healthcare from our client down in Florida. 12 days. This is the kind of thing, John, from your experience working back at Covidien, that's the kind of thing that GE or Covidien would have taken 12 to 18 months to do, not 12 days, right? So one of the things that opportunity can bring is a chance to do things a little bit different, right? And make things happen.
Absolutely.
So those are the core questions that I had. I'm looking on the Q&A. Someone has a question about what you think about corporate / strategic investors as early lead investors. Any concerns about potential downward pressure or acquisition prices, them knowing too much when you get to that point, as far as, and if they try to get a first right of refusal. Who would like to take that one first?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of quotes. You're right. You have to be careful. You don't want to give away too many rights. I think as far as them knowing too much, you want them to know what's going on. If you want to sell the company, if you don't want to sell the company, then, keep them out of it. But if your goal is to get acquired, then you need to engage them. And I haven't really found that to be a problem. I think, again, you just got to be careful what kind of rights you give away and make sure those rights expire before you need to raise the next money or something like that. And then there's always got to be a story if, like, we had a corporate come in and then stop investing. And so, why did they do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons, had nothing to do with us, frankly. And so you just got to be aware of that.
Any thoughts on first right of refusal? As far as, are you willing to give that or not willing to give that?
No,
don't do it.
There are, yeah.
First
right of refusal. But there are rights. There are rights of negotiation and other things you can give them that are a little softer and really not a problem.
Yeah,
get a good lawyer.
I would agree with you. First right of negotiation is a little softer. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, hopefully you didn't start the company necessarily for an exit, right? You're there to make this difference on this problem. But there is, for the investors, right, they're going to need to get liquidity. That's still an important thing. And if they start hanging, they're basically messing with the process to get a market level transaction. They're making it difficult for other companies to come in. They're showing, look, we're here. They're spooking other companies. Those types of arrangements are completely mucking within your ability to get what market would clear you at. And I'm sure, Dave, this is the world you live in. Your take would be interesting here. But to me, they're awesome if they bring a lot to the party. But do they really? You have to really think about what are they bringing here. If you have someone like a non-corporate VC that can give you the same capital but isn't giving you those terms, then I would advise against it. I've
just been informed.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, so before we have 1 minute left, so I have to wrap things up. Gentlemen, you've been brilliant. It's really been a pleasure and an honor, actually, to hear each of your stories. I'm confident the audience has learned a lot by what you've been able to achieve. I wish you continued success. I look forward to learning more about how you continue to evolve and achieve more great things as you go forward in the future. And hopefully I don't have to personally benefit from your products, but I'm glad they're going to be available in case I do or my family needs to. As far as people that are in the audience right now, thank you for joining us. This is part of the day-long sessions at Biomed Digital. There's a startup stadium that's going along. Please look into your agenda for the next events that are going to be taking place in the near future. And thank you again for joining us. Haley, back to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, team, for a really great panel discussion. Rahul, John, Andy, Dave, and obviously thanks to our sponsor, MedWorld Advisors. We couldn't do without you. So stay tuned for the next session. We have really great innovative companies doing some pitches. And don't forget the Mass Medic Breakout Happy Hour at 4 p.m. Eastern, sponsored by Thermo Fisher. That's taking place in the Networking Lounge. So we hope to see you all there. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.